Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So, in the last class, we saw that the teacher, the spiritual preceptor, gave the answer to the sixth question, that what is the self. That's the portion which we were studying. So now we will enter to the last question, which the student asked to the teacher. And the question was, how to discriminate between the self and the non-self. So this was the seventh question. So in the process of answering, we will find the concept of the Panchakosha will come into picture. That our real nature is as if covered by these 5 layers of ignorance. This Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Anandamaya Kosha. So this Panchakosha is as if covering our real nature. So these 5 coverings is the non-self, and the one who is hidden within these 5 layers is the self. So first we have to know what the non-self is and have to negate them one by one to at last get established in the self. And for that we will find the Guru starts instructing. First he will give a general overview of what the self and what the non-self is, how to discriminate between them, and then he will take one by one each of the koshas and to study its nature and how to discriminate and how to negate them so that we can get established in the self ultimately. So first we start with the 149th verse. In reply to the question that how to discriminate between the self and the non-self, the Guru starts explaining from the 149th verse. What he is saying? Koshai Ananda Mayadhyai Panchabhi Atma na Sangvrito Bhati Nija Shakti Samutpannai Shaivala Patalai Eva Ambu Vapistham. So the Atman does not shine clearly. This Atma na bhati. Why doesn't shine clearly? Being covered by this Annamaya, by the food shit or the material shit and the other shits. Panchamayadhyai, Panchamaya Adi. Annamaya, Annamayadhyai, Annamaya Adi means the Annamaya kosha and the other koshas with which the self is concealed. So that's why it does not shine clearly. So which has arisen by its own power. So as we know, this is a proponent of Advaita Vedanta. So where Advaita Vedanta says there is only one reality, the non-dual conscious principle, which is appearing as the universe. There is nothing apart from that. So now the moment I say that the reality is concealed by something, the question of duality comes. That the something which is concealing it is something which is apart from the self. So here to make the idea clear what it is saying, Nija Shakti Samutpannaya. So that ignorance, the layers of ignorance which is covering the self has actually arisen from the self. Nija Shakti by its own power. Nija Shakti Samutpannaya. From its own self, from within itself, something which has came out from that intrinsic within. As in the Mundaka Upanishad, we find the example of the spider. Just the spider, the way it, from its own body, it throws out the spider webs. The spider webs comes out from the spider, the Urna Nabhi. So that's how the Mundaka Upanishad says. So as just the way the spider is throwing out, is salivating the web, the spider web, which speaks of what? The spider is both the material cause as well as the efficient cause. So these are the terms which they use, this Upadana Karana and Nimitta Karana. Nimitta Karana means the one who is the operator, who is acting. He is the Nimitta. And Upadana means the material. Just when a potter is making the pot, the clay is the Upadana Karana. And the potter himself is the Nimitta Karana. The one who is modeling, who is giving shape to the pot is the Nimitta, and the material which he is using is the Upadana. So in this case of the spider web, the spider himself is the Upadana Karana as well as the Nimitta Karana. He himself is the agent as well as the materials that comes from within. So that's the example which we find in the Mundaka Upanishad, and that's the idea which is being reinstated here with the word Nija Shakti Samutpanna. It comes from its own power. And then Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya is giving an example. What's the example? Shaivala Patalai Iva Ambu Vapistham. Just the water in a well. So what we find, that there is no need for some extraneous pollutants to come and cover it. You will find if the water is there as if from within, that the greens come, that the moss, a sheet of moss is formed over the water. So, however the place you may keep it clean, that you don't allow any dust particle to fall, if the water is clean, the moss is formed. So it gives a sense feeling that there was no some extraneous cause. As if the water, if it stands still, the moss is created as if from within. So that's why the example here is giving just the way the moss which is formed as if within the water and it covers the water. Similarly, the ignorance is generated by the self and self alone, and then it covers the self. So that's how the self is not revealed. So the moss arises as if from water, on the surface of water, and prevents the water from being seen clearly. So similarly, the Atman, that also cannot be clearly perceived due to the seeds which get superimposed on the Atman itself. So they are the superimposition. The Atman is appearing as these five sheets. So the word Samvrito here is very important. What Samvrito means? So to cover something. Samyak Rupena Avrita. Avrita means to cover. Samvrita means Samyak Rupena. Completely it has covered. As Sri Ramakrishna almost gives a similar example, that in the village pond, the villagers use the water. But you will find that the water is just covered with scum. The water is not visible. The green scum has covered the water. Now when the villagers use the water, they remove the scum. The water becomes visible. They most probably use it for cleansing the vessels or whatever it may be. And the moment they leave the pond, it takes a very short time. The scum again comes and covers the pond. Nothing is visible. So that's the idea of Samvrita. That however we may try to remove the scum, it again comes and covers. Now and then in life, we do get a flash through our experiences of life, that someone has died. The question comes, what after this? As Swami Vivekananda is giving a very nice example in one of his lectures in Jnana Yoga, that our life is just like traversing on a mountainous terrain. We are enjoying the journey, and suddenly we find I cannot proceed anymore. I am just standing on the edge of a precipice. One step I proceed, it will result in a fall. So in the life, we find that however we may keep ourselves engaged in all the material engagement, there do come some moment in life, maybe the death of some near and dear one, where we have to ask that question, what after that? These are the moments when we find that as if the ignorance is falling off. That's the time you'll find all the so-called the funeral services. You'll find what? That's the time we think of God. That's the time we chant the Bhagavad Gita. We chant the Kathopanishad, where the idea that we are the self, this body is something which is transient. All those ideas we try to reflect upon. So it comes, but again they are gone. It's forgotten. So that's the idea of samvrita, that it is so difficult to get rid of the non-self. It comes and covers. So that's a wonderful example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. Then what's the way out? What's the way out? Now we find another very nice example. The Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's this guru, who initiated him in the Advaita Vedanta, in the practice of the Jnana. So he one day was instructing Guru Maharaj, Sri Ramakrishna, what? That we have to cleanse the mind regularly. The sadhana has to go on assiduously. Why? He was giving the example of a brass utensil. That to keep the brass utensil shining, we have to polish it every day. We have to go on polishing it every day. Then only that shine comes out. Otherwise, if you leave it, you will find that it also gets covered by a thin layer because of oxidation, and its shine is gone. So similarly, the mind, to keep it shining, to always be aware of our spiritual dimension of existence, we have to go on practice. So it speaks of as if the practice, the spiritual sadhana is something which has to go on, as if there is no end to it. When the mind comes, gets covered by the scum, remove it, again you remove. And then Sri Ramakrishna, in response to this Totapuri's wonderful example, he asks a question. That question is very interesting. The question is saying, what if the brass utensil gets converted into gold? So the gold never gets that covering. It's the brass or the copper vessel get that covering. So what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating, that all our spiritual practices, that constant effort to get rid of the ignorance has to go on, but not infinitely. Once we go to that realization, once the spiritual realization dawns in, it's no more a matter of intellectual conviction. It has taken me to a type of realization. And that speaks of that conversion of the copper or the brass into gold. And once it has been done, then the sadhana falls off. There's no need. As Gautam Buddha gives a very nice allegory, that no one carries the raft on his shoulders once he has crossed the river. The raft is there to help you to cross the river. After you have crossed the river, the work of the raft is done. No one carries it on his shoulder. So that's the idea. So this ignorance is so intense. Till we go to the realization, all our effort is something momentary. It do give us a flash of realization. But again, our mind gets covered. Again, that's why we assiduously go on practicing. But how long? Till it takes us to that realization. And when the ignorance falls off and the nature or real nature gets revealed, and I get merged in it, I get identified with it. So that's the idea which we will find gradually Shankaracharya also will be speaking of. So let's proceed to the next sloka. What he's saying in the next verse, we will find Shankaracharya says what happens when the moss is removed from over the water surface. When what is removed? Tat Shaivala, the 150th verse. Tat Shaivala apanaye samyak salilang pratiyate shuddham. Trishna santapaharang sadhya Sokhya pradam param pungsaha. So what's saying? What he's saying? That when the moss is removed, so in the village, that's the thing we see. That in the olden days, when there was no access to pure water, the pond water was the only water for quenching their thirst, for their daily course, whatever, whenever they needed water, that was the only source of water. So what they will do, they will clear off the moss, and the same water, that transparent water, when you remove the moss, is visible. That was there to quench your thirst and to give you a sense of relaxation, bliss, that you are thirsty, your thirst has been quenched, and you feel satiated. So that's the idea. This tat shaivala apanai, when you remove that moss, that scum is removed. Samyak shalilam pratiyate shuddham. The pure, transparent water becomes visible. Pratiyate. Shuddham. Pratiyate. And then what's the utility of it? Trishna santapaharam. The suffering because of the thirst, the unquenchable thirst of our worldly passions. That's the Trishna. That is satiated once for all. So that's Trishna santapaharam sokhya pradam param pungsaha. And you get sokhya pradam. Sokhya means sukha. It gives you something in Sanskrit. When this word prada is used after anything, prada means to give. What to give? To give what? Sokhya means sukha. So this cleansing of the layers of ignorance results in the satiation of our unquenchable thirst in the form of the worldly desires, and it gives us that sukha. Prada means to give, to deliver that sukha, which is param. In this life, we do have momentary pleasures, but this is the supreme bliss. It's no more momentary. It is something which is perpetual, which is going to stay with you. That's why it is called param, the supreme bliss, the supreme happiness. To whom it is being delivered? To the pungsa, to the person. Pungsa is the man, the person who is striving for attaining this spiritual realization. So for him, he attains this supreme bliss. So again and again we say, this was the idea that our real nature is Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa. That all the bliss that we enjoy in this life, all the bliss that we experience in this life, we, because of ignorance, we think that it is the world outside there with all its advertisement that is going to give me happiness. That I want a car, I want a house, I want a good job. Once I get it, I am happy. And I think they are the things which give me happiness. But the scripture again and again is asserting that the happiness comes from the self and self alone. All the happiness which we get in this world is not because of the thing. It's only because of desirelessness. The moment my desire is fulfilled, for the time being I am desireless. And then this Ananda Swarupa, the bliss factor of myself, that reveals. That's the example which we again and again resort to, is the Swami Vivekananda's example in Raja Yoga. He is using the lake as the allegory of the mind. The mind is a reservoir, and its bottom is as if the self, which is Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa. What this means? Now we say that the self is beyond all attributes. Then how can you say that it is Sat Chit Ananda? You say it has no attributes, no adjectives, and now you are saying it is Sat, it is Chit, it is Ananda. Are these Sat, Chit, Ananda the attributes of the self? No. It's actually the negation of the idea of limitation which we have because of ignorance. That has been spoken of as Sat, Chit, Ananda. It's a negation. What's negation? Sat means that whose existence is never interrupted by any phase of time, past, present, future. I have the idea I was born at certain date, certain year, certain time, and I know for certain that today or tomorrow or years later, I don't know when, this existence is going to end. And as long as it is there, it is going through change. I was an infant and then was a kid, I was a teenager, then I became a middle-aged person, then I will become old, then disease will come, and at last death. The Shada Vikara is there. As long as I exist, the Shada Vikara, Jayate, Asti, Vardhate, Viparinamate, Apakshiyate, Nasti. We are born, we exist, Jayate is to take birth, Asti is existence, and then Vardhate, we grow, Viparinamate, in the middle age the transformation starts, Apakshiyate, then the process of decay starts, and then Nasti, the death is there. So this is our existence. So the scripture says no. It is because of our identification with the Panchakosha. We take their nature to be my nature and think that I was born at a certain point of time, I'm going to die at a certain point of time, and as long as I exist, I'm going through changes, transformation. So to deny this fact, the scripture is saying you are Sat Swarup. So in Vedanta, the Sat is defined as that which is Trikal Avadita Satya. What is truth? That whose existence is never annihilated. It was, it is, it will be, and it is as if in the eternal present. Because as there is no transformation, all the concept of time comes with transformation. If there is no transformation, there is no concept of time. So it is in the eternal present. So that's what means Sat, is the negation of the idea of that limitation, that I don't exist forever. He's saying, you're Sat. And then immediately after that, again the doubt will come. Okay, even we know that nothing is destroyed, that everything at last gets converted into energy. This matter and energy is interconvertible. Everything gets converted into energy. So we, at last, even after this annihilation, in some form or other, either as matter or as energy, we do exist. That can never be annihilated. But that is jada. That is something which is inert. Somehow, by the conglomeration of this inert matter, life has emanated, consciousness has emanated. So consciousness is epiphenomenon. So that's again another wrong notion which we have. So Vedanta again is asserting, is negating the fact that you are not inert, you are Sat. You are the one whose existence can never be annihilated by any phase of time, past, present, future. And that existence is consciousness. It is the intelligence. It is not matter. Actually, it's the matter is the epiphenomenon. Because of the consciousness, it appears as both Chit and Achit. In this world, we see animate objects as well as inanimate objects, animate beings and inanimate objects. All this is the projection of the consciousness. So consciousness is the fundamental thing. So the thing which is Sat is intelligent. That is meant by Chit Swarupata. And then again the doubt comes. If that's the fact, I at present realize that I exist, I am aware of my existence, but that existence is not something which gives me perpetual bliss. I am going through the waves. Sometime I am in ecstasy, again I am in utter dejection. Constantly a life as if is throwing me. I am helpless. I am in the waves of the life. Sometimes it is throwing me to the crest of the ecstasy, and then again it is taking me to the trough of depression. So am I to go on helplessly this way through eternity? And then again the scripture is asserting the fact, no, you are beyond these dualities of joy and sorrow. You are always at peace with yourself. You are in the state of ananda, bliss, which is beyond the concept of this duality of joy and sorrow. You transcend that. This Ananda Swarupata speaks of that bliss which is beyond the duality of the joys and sorrows which we experience in this life. So that's your real nature. And now Swamiji is saying that's the thing which is as if the base of the lake called mind. Now when the lake is disturbed, I can never see the bottom. When it is calm, I can see the bottom. Now Swamiji is saying a very interesting thing, that when the lake of mind is disturbed, I can see partially something. What are the things I can see? Two aspects, that of the three, the Sat Chit Ananda Swarupata, the Sat Swarupata, the Chit Swarupata, this never gets obscured. Whether I am happy, whether I am dejected, I am aware that I am. So this amness, my existence and the awareness of this existence, it is always there. But what gets obscured is that Ananda Swarupata. So it is a partial filtration. It's just like the mica sheet. In the olden days, even in Rajasthan, if you go to the old buildings, you will find when they haven't yet discovered the glass. In the old buildings, the windows had the mica sheet. Why? In the desert, in the tropical weather, the mica sheet is such that it allows the light to pass through. So the room will be lighted in the daytime. But it doesn't allow the heat to pass through. It insulates the heat. So it's a partial filtration. It allows the light but not the heat. So similar something like that, when the waves of mind are there, in that reservoir, the Sat Swarupata, the Chit Swarupata, they never get obscured. They pass through. I'm always aware of my existence. What gets obscured is the Ananda Swarupata. I am in chasing after the desires. I find my mind is in turmoil. One huge desire comes that engulfs all other desire. You'll find that in life, that my mind is distracted with 1,000 things, and suddenly for something I have an intense desire. All those other distractions are as if eaten, engulfed by that huge desire. So there's a huge wave in my mind in the form of the desire. I want most probably the computer or a laptop or most probably a car, whatever it may be. And the moment I get it, that's for a moment, there is no wave in the mind. That all the waves were engulfed by one huge wave, and that huge wave also calms down when the desire is satiated for the time being. And I find the immense bliss. So all these waves are the filtering factor of that Ananda. When the lake is totally calm, there is no wave, I can see the bottom. So similarly, this Ananda Swarupata is now palpably visible. It comes, it percolates my body, mind, senses, it wells up. But because of ignorance, I think the object gave me happiness. As a result, what happens? That again there is the satiation, that what I wanted I got. Again, but my idea is always the desires, the fulfillment of desires give me happiness. Because of this ignorance, again I chase after desires. And that's what Shankaracharya is saying very nicely, that what results in the transmigration life after life, the cycle of avidya, kama, karma. From ignorance, avidya, the kama, the desire arises. What's the ignorance? I forgot my real nature. I am thinking that I am a little helpless being who is in constant need to be fed by something which is extraneous. And that's chase. Because of this ignorance, I'm constantly chasing after the desires of life. From avidya comes kama, and that results in karma. All the actions ensues from it. And that again results in sanskaras. And once the sanskar is found, again I am prone to action. And this cycle goes on, life after life. So the moment I realize that I am ever blissful, the self, there is no need for me to chase after the desires, because they never give me happiness. They advertise, but the real happiness always comes from within. It wells up from within. Then what happens? I segregate myself, discriminate myself, separate myself from all the so-called layers of ignorance to remain established in myself. I don't allow the mind to break into this turmoil of desires and restlessness. I allow it to become. That's why in the scripture, whenever they're speaking of the spiritual evolved soul, they use the term dhira. Dhira. Dhira means one is calm, one is tranquil, one his mind is never disturbed. Such a person will find that the bliss is always there, perpetual bliss, because nothing is filtering off the bliss. The mind is calm. So that's the idea. So now you get the supreme bliss. It's no more momentary bliss. And your previously desire was satisfied, you felt a sense of satiation, again a new desire came because of ignorance. You were chasing. You were in a hedonistic treadmill. You were always running, but going nowhere. As in the poem of Swamiji we find, ever running, never reaching, nor even a distant glimpse of the shore. That's what is our condition. Constantly running, not reaching the shore. So here, once I realize, then that bliss no one can take away. Satiation I have attained, not to be again disturbed by all the desires. So it has once for all the desires has fallen off. And that's the idea which has been spoken of, that once this ignorance is removed, Trishna Santapa Haram, all the Trishna is quenched forever, and you get Saudhya, the Saukhya Pradam Param, the supreme bliss. So that's the thing which has been spoken of in the 150th verse. And then the next verse says that once the coverings are eliminated, the self stands revealed. So these are a very general discussion. Before going into the discussion of the Panchakosha, we will take one by one layers of ignorance at a time, find out its nature, negate it, go to the next layer. So that will start after this overview of the discrimination between the self and the non-self. So what he is saying now, that the self gets revealed when this covering is eliminated. What is this? Panchanam api koshanam. The idea of this Panchakosha we find now coming. Panchanam api koshanam apavade vibhati ayang shuddha nityanandaikarasam pratyak rupaha paraha swayam jyotihi. So what it is saying? Panchanam api koshanam. These 5 layers of ignorance. The Annamaya Kosha, the shit, the food, shit of food, because this physical body is nothing. The food which we eat is getting converted into this physical body. There's the Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, the shit of vitality. That we find, we get identified with that. If I am a bit sick, I say I am sick. It is actually my body is sick, but I say I am sick, as if my real nature has been affected by that sickness, by the lack of vitality. I am energetic. So this speaks of our identification with the Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha. I get identified with my thoughts. I get identified with my this Nishchayatmika Buddhi, the Vijnanamaya Kosha. This is my ideology, this is my conviction. So with that, we get identified. So, and this Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss which we experience from deep sleep or from the satiation of the desires, we get identified with them. So these all has to fall off. Panchanam api koshanam apavada. Apavada means it is opposite of adhyasa, means something has been superimposed on something. Just the way I see a snake in a rope, this is called superimposition. This is called adhyasa. And when that ignorance is removed, someone brings a torch, focuses on the rope, and then the snake has vanished. I see the rope as it is. So this process of negating the superimposition to find out its real nature is called apavada. So here the word apavada is being used to in that sense, that when this superimposition of the 5 layers of our ignorance is removed, then what happens? Vibhati ayang shuddha. That self is not something which has to be attained. We say I have to attain in spiritual journey. Like any other attainment, we have that idea that I have to attain peace. I have to attain that tranquility. So here the scripture is saying you don't have to attain. That gets revealed. You are that. Because of the ignorance, all these layers of ignorance, your real nature was something forgotten, but it was always there. Vibhati, it just now becomes resplendent. It reveals itself, which was covered. The vibhati means to reveal. It gets revealed. And that is pure. I am Shuddha. There's nothing of this world can tarnish it. Just the way when I see a snake in a rope, can the snake in any way inflict poison in that rope? No. It doesn't have the capacity. When I see a huge reservoir when I'm passing through a desert, it's actually a mirage. Can that mirage in any way drench even a single sand particle? No. It doesn't have the capacity to drench even that huge reservoir. It doesn't have the capacity to drench even a single sand particle. So what's the idea? The thing which is superimposed has in no way has the capacity to affect the thing on which it is superimposed. It can in no way affect. So that's the idea of Shuddha, pure. Nothing can tarnish it. It is beyond all so-called effects which we find in this world. Nothing. As Sri Ramakrishna in very plain words giving an example. The sun is shining on the sky, in the sky, and one man is reading the holy scriptures in its light, and another person is counterfeiting the coins. Does the sun get affected by any of those activities? The one who is reading holy scripture, does it make the sun holy? Or the one who is counterfeiting the coins, does it make the sun impure? No. The sun's nature is just to reveal. It in no way gets affected by the things, the things which are superimposed, which is appearing. All those appearances in no way can affect the thing on which it is appearing. So they in no way can affect. So that's the idea. Vibhati ayam Shuddha is pure. Nityanandaika rasam. That's just now we were saying it is always in that state of perpetual bliss. Nitya Ananda. Nitya means everlasting. Ananda means bliss. The bliss which is everlasting, which can never in any way be annihilated. It is always there. The bliss which can never be obscured. That's the Nityananda. So its nature is Nityananda. And Pratyaka Rupa. To find, where I have to find it? Not by moving out through the mind and the senses. In Sanskrit there are two wonderful words. Parak, Pratyak. Parak means moving out. Pratyak means moving within. So where to find it? This constant interaction with the world through the mind and the senses have to be stopped and have to dive within. Pratyak means to dive within. There's the idea of Pratyaka Rupa, Paraha, Swayam Jyotihi. So Para means it is the supreme. Because of it, everything appears. It has no cause. It is the ultimate. There is no cause. But God was never born. He is. So that's the idea of Para. That consciousness is the supreme principle, the most fundamental principle. Because of it, everything appears. So it's the supreme, Paraha. And self-effulgent. There is no need for it to borrow the light of something to get revealed. Because of it, everything gets revealed. As we find that in the Kathopanishad, that wonderful sloka is there. There's Natatra Surya Bhati na Chandra Tarakam Nema Vidyuto Kutoyam Agnihi Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Sarvam Tameva Bhantam Anubhati Sarvam. That because of your light, everything gets illumined. Even the sun, the moon, nothing can illumine. The sun, the moon, everything gets illumined because of the self. It is the self which reveals everything. So that's the idea that he is Swayam Jyoti. It is his illumination by which the entire world, the entire universe is getting illumined. So once the koshas are removed, that resplendent self reveals itself. So that's the idea which has been spoken of in the 151st verse. So I read a very nice story. It's a story of the golden Buddha. In Thailand, there is a golden Buddha. It's a place of tourist attraction. Many people go to visit that. There's a nice story behind it. Actually, even a few decades earlier, in the 60s, most probably in the 1960s, suddenly this golden Buddha was revealed. What happened? That at that time, in a Buddhist monastery, there was a huge clay Buddha. It was made of clay. It was a huge clay Buddha. And now, because of some government plan, they were building some roads, all highways. So, as per the government's plan to build highway, as per the map, the highway was falling on that Buddhist monastery. So, from the government, the proposal was given that you have to shift your premises. We will give land, we will give compensation, but you have to shift and build up a new monastery in the new place. So they go from the government, the land was allotted, compensation money was allotted, everything was allotted. So now the process started. And now the last thing they thought of taking to the new premises was that clay Buddha which they had. It was a huge clay Buddha. Now it was a big challenge to lift it. So the crane they had to take the help of a resort to the help of a crane. They had to need they have hired a crane, and with the crane they thought of lifting. Now it was a clay image. And in the evening hours when they started to move it up, and it so happened it started raining, it was drizzling. Now as the clay image was already taken out from the shed and they were trying to move it up, and it was now exposed to the weather, and the rain started falling on it, and after it was made of clay. So it started, what happened, because of its own weight, and as the clay got wet, it became softened and it started crackling. There were some cracks developing. So the monks got very much concerned. They told, put it down, put it down. So it was immediately put down, and they covered it with the tarpaulin sheet because it started raining and it was already exposed now. So covered it with the tarpaulin sheet. And then it was already evening hours. So they after just a few half an hour, it became dark. So they had to stop the work. Now, quite at night, the abbot, he was a quite senior monk. The abbot of the monastery came with a torch to see how that statue is doing, whether it is okay or it has still developed more damage. It has got more damaged. So what he did, he came with a torch and removed the tarpaulin sheet a bit and focused on the Buddha's image. And that focus fell on the crack which has developed. And from within the crack, he saw something shining. So he was a bit surprised that after all it's made of clay, what can be shining within that? So now, next day, they started chiseling from the portion where that crack has developed. They started removing the clay to find out what was there inside. And to their amazement, they find there was a image of Buddha made of gold. They never knew that there is an image of Buddha made of gold. Now, they had to inform to the government. The archaeological department came for doing research from where this golden Buddha came. Even they were not aware of the fact from how that golden Buddha came. And now after research, a very interesting fact came out that about a century back, so there's some this Indonesian pirates attacked Thailand, and they somehow was able to topple the government, and there was a chaos. They started plundering the entire nation. They were going and plundering, taking away the wealth. They started ruling the country, and a huge crisis. There was a huge chaos and crisis everywhere. And this Buddhist monastery was then there at that time. And the monks on those days, at that time they had this golden Buddha. So now they were having that fear that any time these plunderers may come to our monastery, and naturally their attention will be on this golden Buddha, it will be stolen. So out of fear and this apprehension that it may be stolen, this will be our monastery will be plundered, they covered the Buddha with clay and gave it a shape of Buddha so that it appeared as a clay Buddha. But what happened, that as they feared, that's what happened. These pirates came one day and did plunder the ashram, and most probably they killed the monks, and those who somehow survived, they fled, and these pirates did plunder the monastery, but they left out that statue of Buddha, thinking it's made of clay, it's of no value. And then 50-60 years passed. These plunderers, pirates, somehow managed to rule that country for 50-60 years. So one generation, 2 generations passed. That monastery was an abandoned monastery. No one was there. And then again from within the country there was an uprising, political uprising, and the pirates were removed. And again they got freedom. They started ruling the country. And as this monastery was after all having the signs of monastery, the new monks came and again started staying there, and it again started growing up as a monastery. They saw the Buddha statue there, but they never knew that actually it's a golden Buddha covered with a clay. They never knew because there was a gap of generation. And now because of this archaeological research, they found the fact. So this story is something wonderful story. So now even now also in Thailand, many goes to see there's a golden Buddha, or they call it emerald Buddha. So there's a story behind that. That they say that we all actually are that golden Buddha. Something is within us which is resplendent, Swayam Jyoti. Because of the layers of this clay, of this ignorance, from which all the negativities come. So this has developed. And that's why we are not in any way aware of the real nature. Once that clay falls off, then the real nature reveals itself. And that's the idea which is spoken of as Swayam Jyoti. It's the thing because of which everything is illumined. So, after saying that, the 152nd verse, what it is, Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya is saying, this Atma Anatma Viveka Kartavya Bandha Muktaye Vidusha Tena Eva Anandi Bhavati Swam Vijnanam Satchidanandam. This is the only way to happiness. What? To remove this bondage, the wise man should discriminate between the self and the non-self. Atma Anatma Viveka. The self and the non-self, Viveka means discrimination. Kartavya. That's the only duty. For why? For what? Bandha Muktaye. To go beyond this bondage. That's what the Vidusha, the wise man, have always been doing, and that's what they instruct. So to remove this bondage, the wise man should discriminate between the self and the non-self. And by that alone comes, so why should I do that? What's the purpose for it? So the purpose is that alone can give us happiness. Tat eva anandi bhavati swam vijnanam satchidanandam. So by knowing your real nature, which is Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa, as we were describing in the previous verse, by knowing its nature as the Sat Swarupa, as the Chit Swarupa, as the Ananda Swarupa, and removing this ignorance, layers of ignorance, through Viveka, one can attain that bliss. Now this Viveka is the discrimination, that I am the self, and all these layers of ignorance is the non-self. So this Viveka is the prime spiritual discipline that comes first. Once you have the Viveka, you have the power of discrimination, then only you will renounce. Vairagya, the renunciation, that what is not going to give me happiness in life, what which is not eternal. The question of renouncing that comes only after discrimination. So Viveka is the first spiritual practice. From that comes Vairagya. From the Vairagya comes Samadhamadi Shat Sampatti. And then last comes Mumukshutvam. So these are the fourfold spiritual practices which has been spoken of in Vedanta. There is a fourfold spiritual practice: Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhamadi Shat Sampatti, and Mumukshatvam. Here only Viveka has been spoken of, because Viveka leads to the all other practices. From Viveka, the Vairagya is bound to come. Once I know what is pleasurable and what is preferable, as very nicely in the Upanishad it has been spoken of, that Sreya and Preya. Sreya is that which will give us that ultimate bliss. It is something which is preferable. And Preya is the apparent happiness which we enjoy in this world from the sunset pleasures of life. That is a Preya. So the one who can discriminate between these two is the wise man, that to distinguish between the pleasurable and the preferable, with the Sreya and the Preya. Sreya is the preferable, Preya is the pleasurable, apparently pleasurable. So one who can discriminate. From the discrimination comes Vairagya. Now I won't be in running after the pleasurable things. I want the preferable, Sreya. As very nicely in an allegory it has been mentioned that a person went to a monk and just was praising him by saying that, oh, you are great, you have renounced. And the sage immediately replied, it's not me, it's you who have renounced. It's me, not me, it's you. And the man asked, how come? I am so much entangled in the world. It is you who have renounced. Then this monk told, I have renounced something trivial for the real treasure. And you have renounced the treasure for something trivial. Whose renunciation is great? So that's the thing which the scripture is indicating by Vairagya. That it is not a negative thing. That I am renouncing something trivial to get something which is the real treasure. So it's not something negative. It is something which is going to give me the ultimate bliss. So from that Viveka comes Vairagya. Then comes this Samadhamadi Shat Sampatti. Samadhama Uparati, Shraddha, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana. That once that Vairagya, the renunciation has developed, it's not that in a day I can get established in that, because my mind is habituated in the old way of living. So I have to develop that power of controlling the mind. This controlling the mind is sama. That has to be followed by the controlling of the senses. That I cannot forcefully control the senses. It will lead to mental aberration, psychological disturbance. I have to have an ideal based on which my mind has to be controlled, and then I can control the senses. The Shamaka is followed by Dhamma, and then Uparati. Uparati means I will find that because of the old way of life, because of the old impulses, the mind again and again goes back to the old way of living. I have to bring it back, Uparati, again and again. And this is not a very easy process. We have to go through a lot of hardship. For that we have to have that power of forbearance, titiksha. And why should I do all those things? Because I have faith that in the scriptures what has been mentioned is not something, just some woolly-headed ideas, something which has nothing to do with reality. I have the faith that it's only this one who is a realized soul out of unbound compassion is coming down from his realization to instruct me in the spiritual way of living. If I follow that, I too will also be the higher of that perpetual bliss. This faith, if I don't have, why should I go through this process? The Shraddha. And then with all this, you can get Samadhana. Then comes the question of the mind being tranquil, getting absorbed in the idea of the self. Samadhana means to be absorbed in the thought of the self. And for all this, at last the guiding practice is Mumukshutvam. I should have a tremendous urge, tremendous eagerness to ultimately attain that goal. And all this from where it comes? From the Viveka. That's the starting point. So that's why here only Viveka has been mentioned. That Atma and Atma Viveka. Once you have that, that alone will lead to all other practices. So that's why I say that's the only duty. Develop that discrimination. Now you won't have to think that discrimination will almost force you to follow the other steps, and it comes spontaneously. It will happen. So that's the only your kartavya, to develop that viveka. So even you will find in script in our scriptures they say that when you recognize that what is maya, what is ignorance, your work is done. Once you recognize, it falls off naturally. So Viveka speaks of that recognizing that what is real, what is unreal. As Sri Ramakrishna in a very nice way gives a very simple example, that a group of children were just playing, and some elderly person who happens to be their uncle, they are related, blood related, his relative uncle. So just to play pranks with the children, he enters that room wearing a bear skin. He was looking like a bear. And the children were all frightened. They were just shouting, running hither and thither, scared. And then one of the small girl somehow recognized. She told, "Oh, it's our uncle." The moment she told it's our uncle, this man, this elderly person, removed the bear skin. And then Sri Ramakrishna is saying that the moment you recognize the Maya, it falls off, it removes its covering. Because there is its purpose, it cannot serve any purpose, it cannot scare anymore, it cannot keep you bound anymore, because it has been recognized. So it removes its covering. So that's why here it says Viveka is that capacity to recognize the Anatma as the Anatma and to know that you are the self. Once that is done, your half work is done. The ignorance will fall off naturally. So that's the thing only which has been indicated here. This Atmana, the other things will follow naturally. Once that comes, others will follow. So that's the kartavya. That's the only the duty as a spiritual aspirant which we have to go on pursuing, which ultimately will lead us to that liberation, take us beyond the bondage. Bandha muktaye vidusha. And that will give you that ultimately, once you get established in yourself, you will enjoy the bliss, which is the nature of the self. Tena eva anandi bhavati swam vijnanam satchidanandam. So once we realize the self, we become filled with that bliss. All tensions of our life are eliminated. Thereby, we become established in peace and attain that supreme freedom. So this is stated again in the next verse, the 153rd verse, before entering into the discussion of the sheaths. With the 153rd verse, the Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya will conclude this the highlighting of the fact that why this Atma and Atma Vichara is of prior importance, and how perseveringly, patiently we have to do that so that it takes us to that ultimate realization. So that will be spoken of in the 153rd verse, which we will take up in the next class before we proceed to the discussion of the Panchakosha by taking them one by one in details and negating them, so that ultimately we become intellectually convinced about our real nature. And then the Nididhyasana starts. That all our meditation is meditation on the intellectual conviction. I have to be intellectually convinced about my real nature. And then only the meditation, whatever meditation we do, is on that conviction. Why we have to meditate on our intellectual conviction? Because intellectual conviction in no way helps us to get established in the truth. It has to go to that realization. And for that, meditation on the intellectual conviction is something which has been prescribed as the Nididhyasana. So after intellectually negating all those layers of ignorance, one becomes convinced about the self, and now he has to meditate on it till it becomes something which is resplendent, becomes Swayam Jyoti. The ignorance falls off, taking him to that ultimate realization. So we will take up this one by one, all these idea, all these layers of ignorance which has been highlighted by Shankaracharya and described them vividly, so that we have the idea of its real nature. And once we know the nature of them, they fall off. Just like the story which we were just now relating. When the moment that small girl realized the one who is bearing the bear skin, he automatically dropped off that bear skin because it won't serve any purpose anymore. He has recognized this one who is behind that bear skin. So that's the idea which we find has been described in these verses. So we will take up the following verses again in the next class. So with this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskars.